Hi, how are things? My name is Per, and today I want to demonstrate how to create and use arrays in JavaScript. First of all, let's have a look at today's agenda. Here you see the agenda in the form of comments in a JavaScript. We want to know and use arrays. And first of all, you need to define an array. Then I want to show you how to get one item from the array. And then in the end, how to get all items from the array. First of all, let's try to define an array as we do it in JavaScript. When you look at my code, you can see to the left, here is some HTML. And this is the HTML we are using. In line 15, you see this. This will call the JavaScript. And in the JavaScript, we place whatever code we need. So in this case, we want to define an array. Arrays are simple lists that you can use in JavaScript for different purposes, depending on whatever you want to demonstrate. So let's create one. You do it by a variable. So we use the keyword let that we use anytime we create a variable. You know that you can use var, const, or let. In this case, I use list because it's a variable. I call it my list, and then an equals. And here comes the new thing, that's the difference between a normal variable and then a list, because you can add a square bracket. And then you can add some strings here. It could be anything you want to buy. So it could be candy. It could be beer. Could be potatoes. And whatever you need. You can also have numbers in a list. You can also have booleans like true and false. And you can also have, if you want to, other lists inside the list. So if you want to, you can have a list with lists inside. This is a little bit complicated, so for today, I'll only demonstrate what to do if you want to use a list. Now, if I save this list and go to my HTML, and if we then open up our browser, let's see where it is. I think I have to add a new one here. Here it is. Here you see it. We have add content here, and if we press F12, we get to the developer toolbar. And here you can see that we have a JavaScript up and running. But since we did not do anything with the list yet, now we can see both the list and the result here. So to the right you have the result and whatever output there is in the console. And here we have the result on the HTML canvas, so to speak. And here we have the list. Now, first of all, let's try to see the list in the console. So if we say console.log, and then we say my list, and we save it, then you can see over here that we have the list. There are 5 items inside the list. We have candy, beer, it says beet. Yeah, why not beets instead of beer? It's a little bit more boring, but it is also a little bit more healthy, isn't it? And then we have potatoes and a couple of numbers here. If we click on this triangle, you get the content of the list. And here you should see the properties of the list, because if you look at it, you can see that 0 is candy. So normally when you count something, you might say 1, 2, 3. In this case, 0 is candy. So an array is counted like 0, 1, 2, 3. So number 2 from the list should be beets. And just to check whether that is correct, let's try to add in square brackets a 2. And then we get one element from the array. So this is how it is done. Now you have seen how to get one item from the array, so we could say that point B is solved, but you don't see anything on the website yet. We would rather like the content to appear up here. So how do we add it to the HTML from a list? Now I'll comment out this one because it's just boring at this point, but let's try to add something to this HTML tag. It's called content. So you could say content dot inner HTML equals my list, and then we have a sharp thingy here, and you say 0 and save it, and now you can see that the content is candy. And now we could go into our CSS, try to see if we can find it. Here we have the CSS. This is my style sheet, and if we say background color, make it orange or something like that. It should be something like this, and then we should say body here. That's where we want our background color. So here we go. Okay, and now we want to have the orange background color, and we need a semicolon here. We don't need it in the HTML. And then we have font, in this case size, 2 ren. Should be pretty big then, yes. Now we get the text so that you can see it on the screen. But in this case we have like CSS, we have JavaScript, and we have our HTML, and that's how things are made. And when you work in HTML and JavaScript and CSS, you have to have your things in different positions. Okay, but in this case you have seen how to add it, and I would like to say that you could have written something like document get element by ID, and then like this, content, and here the result would be the same. But it is a standard in HTML that if you have an ID, you can actually use the ID as a variable. So this is a very, very nice and easy way to get a little bit of content to your HTML. But this was then how to get one element. Now, if we look at our list, this would be 0, this would be 1, and this would be 2. So if we want potatoes from the list, we should not write 3 but 2 here. And if we save it, you can see that potatoes will turn up. So that's how a list works. And now you can see, let's have both the list and then a single element. Here you see the list, and here you see one element from the list. But if you had to write the list like this, you start with a 0, and then, like that, and then 1, and then 2. Now you could get the result, and we'll need a plus equals here because we just added to our list here. Then you can see that now we get the elements from the list. But why is this very, very unpractical? First of all, if you had to do it like this, why have a list instead of a bunch of variables and then use them? So we need to do something smarter, and here we could use a list loop that will go through the elements of the list and then loop them out. In order to do that, we'll need to define a loop, so I'll write for That's the keyword that will initiate a loop. First, we need a variable as a counter, so we'll say let n be 0. Now we have our counter. Now we need to give a condition. N should be less than my list. And there is a property in a list, as actually you can see it here. It is called length. So you don't have to write 5 when you know that it's 5. Instead, you write length. And then in the end, every time we loop through the list here, you will have an n++. This means that we will add 1 to the value of n every time the loop runs. And then you can kind of get your loop up and running. Now, if we want to see what the value of n is, you can write console log and n. And in this case, you'll see that the n is 1, 2, 3, 4. And here is the holy grail of the list and of JavaScript, because instead of just writing this, you can see up here that when we want to address something, you can get a 2. But in this case, when the list is looping through the numbers here, you could write something along these lines. Inner HTML should add, here it is, should add it to the list. And in this case, you can see that, okay, now we begin to have a list. It doesn't look good though, but it is there. So the only thing we need to do now is to go to our HTML and change it a little bit. Because you can see here that we loop it out inside an article tag, but it doesn't have to be this kind of container tag. Why not use a list? And then of course we have to end the list somewhere. Okay, now we can go back here, and then we should add a little bit of HTML. So you could say we want to add an li tag. And in JavaScript, we glue strings together with a plus. So we'll do that. And just to get a well-formed code, we can do it like this. Now you see that the list will run. Why is potatoes on the top here? Well, because we added it here. So if I comment out this line, now you can see that the list begins to come around. However, it doesn't look well here. So we could just say that this one should be empty. We don't need the placeholder anymore. And let's see what happens. Now it's gone when we update the list. So this is how you define a list, how you get an element from the list, and how you can style your result and even put the result into any kind of HTML that you fancy. And this was my introduction to JavaScript and how to create and use arrays. Thank you for watching and hope to see you soon. Bye bye.